None of us is as virtuous as we'd like to believe. We carry instinctive impulses, a thirst for power, and a latent cruelty that occasionally surfaces. While it's common to reject these aspects, denying them won't make them disappear. In fact, it drives them deep into the unconscious, transforming them into what Carl Jung called the shadow. These repressed feelings carry an enormous amount of psychic energy, which, when unacknowledged, becomes stagnant and manifests in destructive ways, in crises, inner conflicts, and personal limitations. In this video, we'll confront our darker side and explore how to access all the energy that has been misdirected. Imagine there's a part of you that is deep, unknown, and powerful. Jung called this part the shadow. To him, we all carry within us a kind of dark territory, a reflection of the traits we reject or don't want to see in ourselves. But Jungian psychology invites us to understand that the shadow isn't necessarily bad. It is a part of being human, and when recognized and integrated, it helps us grow. As Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, ignoring the shadow is to live incompletely, and therefore, to alienate oneself from one's purpose. Exploring the darker side of our personality challenges the modern tendency to focus only on what is positive and productive. For Jung, true self-knowledge is only possible when we confront our internal contradictions and recognize that we are not made up of only virtues. Accepting our flaws, fears, and repressed impulses allows us to embrace a more complete vision of who we truly are. If the shadow plays such an essential role, why do we avoid exploring it? For Jung, the answer lies in the ego. He saw the ego as the image we consciously build of ourselves, usually an idealized version where only positive traits are allowed, shaped by what we accept to see. The problem is that the ego fears the shadow because it threatens this idealized self-image. Acknowledging emotions like anger, envy, and insecurity destabilizes the ego, which prefers to ignore these darker aspects. But Jung said, "What you resist persists." By suppressing these impulses, we end up creating an even stronger shadow, which expresses itself unconsciously, like projecting our shadow onto other people. Projection happens when we attribute to others qualities that are actually our own, but that we don't want to acknowledge. For example, someone who constantly criticizes other people's arrogance may, in fact, be struggling with repressed arrogance themselves. Jung suggested that a practical way to begin exploring the shadow is to observe the judgments we make. If you feel aversion to a trait in someone else, ask yourself, does this trait somehow reflect something in me that I don't want to see? This kind of self-reflection can be uncomfortable, but it's deeply revealing. Another powerful tool is journaling. Take a few minutes each day to write down thoughts and feelings you usually try to avoid. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to admit about myself? What emotions or desires do I usually repress? This practice helps name and shape the shadow, making it less frightening and more understandable. Jung also believed that dreams are a privileged gateway to the shadow. Pay attention to recurring dreams or unsettling images in your sleep. They might represent repressed aspects of yourself that need to be integrated. Many thinkers disagreed with Jung, arguing that focusing on the shadow could lead to impulsive behavior or even justify destructive actions. Jung, however, argued the exact opposite. Ignoring the shadow is the real danger. According to him, by repressing these contents, we create an internal monster, an unconscious force that begins to influence us from the shadows, shaping our choices and behavior without our awareness. And when we are exhausted or under great pressure, this bottled up energy gains strength and can explode in sudden bursts of anger or disproportionate reactions. So the key is not to fight the shadow, but to accept it as part of ourselves, part of our personality, recognizing it as a fundamental aspect of who we are. When we confront the shadow, we reduce the damage it can cause, because becoming aware of a tendency toward anger, selfishness, or any negative trait gives us the chance to exercise some control over these impulses. And as Jung pointed out, dangerous unconscious forces can become harmless, or at least manageable, once brought to light. In other words, by recognizing ourselves fully, we can minimize the potential harm these flaws would cause if left unchecked. This process is a way of strengthening ourselves, of taking control of what would otherwise control us. But the shadow doesn't only bring weakness, it can also be a tremendous source of energy. Becoming aware of our negative traits doesn't just allow us to restrain them, it also lets us redirect that energy for our own benefit. For instance, instead of giving into envy or anger and causing harm, we can recognize those feelings and use them as motivation for our personal growth. Many of the highly driven people we see out there are those who have learned to access this powerful source of energy. Facing our shadow is something we can do daily by observing how we react to situations and uncomfortable emotions. Take envy, for example. It's a feeling most of us don't like to admit, but it often arises in everyday life. Imagine seeing someone close to you, maybe a coworker, get promoted or publicly recognized. Instead of feeling happy, you notice a discomfort that might appear as inner criticism, thinking, he doesn't even work that hard, or I deserve that more than he did. That's your shadow at work. Instead of letting that feeling consume you or pretending it doesn't exist, pause and ask, why does this achievement bother me so much? What does this person have that I also wish to attain? Doing this can turn envy into inspiration for personal growth, helping you identify the skills you want to develop in yourself. Pride is another shadow that shows up subtly in daily life. How often do we avoid admitting we were wrong, even when we know it could improve our relationships? Picture a heated argument with a friend where you say something you regret. Pride, a shadow we all share, keeps us from apologizing even though we know it's the right thing to do. Facing this shadow means recognizing that saying sorry doesn't diminish our worth. On the contrary, it shows maturity and strengthens the relationship. As you can see, to truly benefit from the shadow, it's not enough to just observe it. You need, as James Hillman said, to give a home to what has been rejected in us. That's what makes us more authentic, and therefore, even more attractive to others. Jung noted that human beings have an instinctive suspicion of those who seem too good, too perfect, those overly identified with an idealized image. We know that behind every shiny mask, there's always a shadow. True charm lies in a complete character, someone who knows and accepts both their strengths and weaknesses. Think of public figures who, by revealing their flaws and struggles, become even more admired. In my honest opinion, honesty is one of the most important virtues, though often overlooked in what Guy Debord called the society of the spectacle. A society where every aspect of our lives is displayed, filtered, and shaped to appear flawless. Social media, advertising, and even everyday interactions promote the illusion of unattainable perfection, hiding all signs of vulnerability. This culture of appearing perfect leaves no room for flaws, doubts, or insecurities, elements that, according to Jung, are central to our shadow. By repressing these aspects to fit social ideals, we create a heavier and heavier shadow, which shows up as emotional breakdowns, depression, and anxiety. Those of us who accept the challenge of confronting the shadow also help heal a polarized world. By dealing with our own flaws, we stop projecting them onto others, avoiding the destructive habit of blaming political opponents, ethnic groups, or any form of difference. Jung suggested that by freeing ourselves from projections, we become aware of a dense shadow, one that brings new conflicts and challenges, but also the opportunity for genuine growth. This is a call to look within ourselves, recognizing that the world's divisions and tensions begin with each one of us.